Hello, and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover show. My guest today is Buzz Lightyear, and I have no idea how this character from Toy Story ended up getting interested in Bitcoin or why he decided to come to this podcast, but I'm glad that I get to talk to him. And I guess this is a world premiere that we find out about one of the many technological fascinations of that one guy who says that he wants to go to infinity and beyond. So, hello, Buzz Lightyear.
Hello, Vlad, and it's great to be interviewed by you. And I hope you get all the answers you are looking for. I'll try to give you the best overlook about the outside of the galaxy, and also how's Bitcoin going to conquer the galaxy.
So, which side of the galaxy or infinity do you talk from right now?
So I'm currently deployed in a small country in Europe. Uh, I'm on a mission here in Portugal to tell people about Bitcoin and to show them why Bitcoin is going to be important to their lives.
So, is there any chance, Buzz Lightyear, that you might be Satoshi?
You should know, Vlad, we are all Satoshi, except for that one character. So
Oh,
yeah,
the dinosaur
the
T
answer
Rex,
is
right? He's not
probably
Satoshi.
yeah. T-Rex is a great guy, but he can't code for sure. Now I was referring to that character from the BS the BS coin or something, B, BSV coin or whatever the guy created this time to fool everybody.
So,
So
you,
yeah, I'm Satoshi like you.
like all of us are.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so this decentralized approach to Satoshi is the reason that brought you to Portugal? Or why Portugal? What is so special about that country, and what does Bitcoin look like in Portugal?
So Portugal is a great place to be right now with a lot of things going on, a lot of startup companies picking Portugal as their own base. Um, great beaches, awesome food, great people, sunlight every year. So you can't get much better than this while living on a big city in Europe, close to the main European cities. So you can be in Paris, in London, in Milan, like in the 2 hours flight. Uh, Decent cost of living, decent cost for accommodation, and great people all around. Bitcoin here in Portugal is still like still like a sci-fi movie. As So people are not aware of Bitcoin. The ones that are aware are just a small niche. We have a very small niche of developers working on great projects on Lightning Network. You can find them on Twitter. They are known. I'm not going to disclose their names because I don't know them personally, so I don't think they would appreciate if some random character from Toy Story would refer to them, but they are very known on Twitter. Also, Bitcoin is generally known on the VC side of the population. So there's not a big VC population here in Portugal, but the few that are into startup companies, into fintech, they know already about Bitcoin, but they got stuck in that blockchain technology mumbo jumbo that started a few years ago. A few of them, a few companies are already looking into that mumbo jumbo because, you know, like a lot of us know that Bitcoin is not going to give them money. So uh, this type of investors, they want to invest on companies and they want big returns on their investments, which is obviously okay and very appreciated. However, investing in Bitcoin, it's it's not gonna give them what they want. They want to to promote the blockchain technology lingo, because once you can create your own token and sell it to folks, you can profit a lot of money with a minimum effort, and you are selling blockchain technology or whatever that means. Because let's face it, this is going to be, I think, a part of our discussion in the future. But uh, yeah, blockchain technology, it's just that. It's just a name. It's not going to deliver anything. In my opinion, of course, I can't predict the future. I'm Buzz Lightyear, but the galaxy is not yet ready for blockchain technology, decentralizing everything, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, let's start with Bitcoin, and we can talk about this a little bit later. So basically, in Portugal, Bitcoin is still seen as sci-fi or criminal activity related. Um, in the general population, people don't even know what's Bitcoin yet. So except for a few niches of people, that we have already um, some some businesses that are accepting Bitcoin, but it's just small businesses from folks like you, like me, who open up their business and start accepting Bitcoin, but no one's really using it yet here. So that's the overall look for 2018 to beginning of 2019. This is probably going to change in the future. It's like everything in the past, like we saw this with the internet, we saw this with email, with Google, with even Facebook. Nobody knew what these things were, and suddenly, uh, in a matter of I don't know, months, 1 year, 2 years, everybody is suddenly using it. And I think Bitcoin is going to be again one of these disruptive technologies, and with of course other implications that we can discuss also further, because it's gonna change a lot of about how people look at money. But I think there will be a shifting point in the future where suddenly nobody knows what it is, and the other day everybody's got a samurai wallet on their mobile phones, and everybody's sending bitcoins to their friends and buying stuff with Bitcoin. I can't, I don't know when that is going to happen, but I assume in the next few years, uh, maybe when we have Lightning deployed on the major wallets, when you can easily and uh, for free, almost for free, wire Bitcoin to your friends. You can pay stuff with Bitcoin without having to worry with confirmations on the main blockchain and fees on the main blockchain.
Right. But let's say that I have about $100 in Bitcoin right now, and I want to visit you in Portugal. Will I find any shops or any hotels or any restaurants which allow me to pay in Bitcoin, or will I have to resort to exchanges?
Shops, yes, for sure, but not the major retailers. But yeah, there are already shops accepting Bitcoin for small businesses. You can get surf lessons paying with Bitcoin. Hotels, for sure, but maybe you have to dig a little bit in to find those specific hotels, because main chains are not accepting Bitcoin yet. So yes, you could do it, but you'd have to to search for those places. So it's not like you get in and you arrive and you start buying stuff with Bitcoin. No, it's not. It's not going to work like that. Not at the moment. You'd have to search, look for those places, for those specific places. It's still a very small niche yet.
Okay, so on your Twitter account, it says that you are a Bitcoin colonialist 24/7. And that's a very big claim to make. And I guess Buzz Lightyear really is a hero who is restless. And what got you into this? I mean, I know that Andy grew up and maybe he didn't have much time to play with you anymore. And I know that Woody can be an asshole sometimes. But why did you get into Bitcoin of all the other activities that you could have undergone in this time?
So my main driver to get into Bitcoin and to start learning about Bitcoin is because I think I've said this on a tweet. I don't know, sometime in the past. I think no, I'm sure I was already a Bitcoiner before I knew about Bitcoin, because if you understand a little bit about economics and about money, you don't have to be a genius to understand that our current money system doesn't add up with what I'm trying to use words that are not very offensive. Basically, when you start wondering what's an interest rate is, and why do people have to buy an house that they are going to pay for the next 40 years and get into debt, and why are financial crises keeping coming, and taxation keeps going higher, but nothing really changes on the way the financial system operates and how banks keep doing their business as always. And when you start growing up and you start making some questions, you realize quickly that there's a problem on our money supply system on today's world, because if you see all around the world, all currencies are currently issued by central governments. And once you understand how that currency is created, you realize that money has no value at all. And when you understand that the amount of money that is created is related to the amount of debt that is laid upon the population of these countries, and suddenly you realize that there's no way to pay the debt, because if you pay all the debt, the currencies collapse, because the currency issue is dependent on the issue of new debt. Then you suddenly realize that every time that a central bank issues a new buttload of currency on their population, people generally see this, I don't know, as a good thing, quantitative easing solutions and stuff like that, because they think that that's going to save them from whatever. It's not. It's just a way to impose taxation on you, on your kids, on your grandkids, and so on, because it's just increasing the debt, and who's going to pay that debt? It's the general population with their taxes. So once you realize these problems, you understand that Bitcoin really is required by the population to have a means to own value without 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 being worried about the continuous basement of the currency that is imposed by central banks and governments all around the world. So and Andy went to business school, he taught me a few things about this stuff too.
Okay, but I think I've had these thoughts for quite some time, and it's hard once you get into Bitcoin not to think about how the system would change if you implemented this currency, which is neutral from a political point of view. And at one point, you arrive to this fundamental question, which makes you ask, well, will the system be any better if we have this currency which has a fixed supply, has this neutrality from a political point of view, has a monetary policy that cannot be arbitrarily changed by governments, but at the same time, you have large amounts of currency which are in the control of the hands of a few. And at the same time, you have the mining, which tends to get centralized at some point. And also you have the issues with fungibility, which need improvement because you can basically discriminate between one Bitcoin and the other. And maybe that we get some of these issues fixed, maybe that we improve fungibility, maybe that the ownership will further decentralize as more people buy small amounts of Bitcoin. But when you start to think about it, how will the transition actually work? We have a fiat system which has been working with all its flaws for quite a few decades since we gave up the gold standard. And I suppose it's going to be hard for people to adapt.
I understand your question, but I really don't think fiat currencies will disappear. So this said, I can't predict. I can predict the future. I don't know what will happen in 20, 40, 60 years, but I can tell you that fiat currencies won't just disappear. Of course, people will still be using fiat currencies, and I think, in my opinion, this is one of the main problems with the promoters of altcoins, that people think that we are going to use many wallets or a wallet with a lot of altcoins. I really don't see that happening. I see people using fiat currencies in the future. I see people using US dollar, euros, yens, rubles, and whatever on a digital layer. I see fiat currencies going digital. I see fiat currencies competing with Bitcoin, of course, because governments won't just give up on their power, on their control. This said, I think we will have a system where Bitcoin will coexist with fiat currencies for a long time. What I think will happen is that more and more people will realize that once you own your money, once you are not once you are not you're not worried about getting your bank account freezed by your political views, or you have your credit cards blocked because you liked some video on YouTube, or you went to a protest and you are now signed as a dangerous person. So these things will happen and are already happening all around the world, but sometimes we forget about them because we fortunately we live in reasonable free countries, but a lot of people don't. So you have to be very careful with what you say, with where you go, where do you spend your money, because your government can easily shut you down. So more and more people around the world will realize that Bitcoin is indeed freedom. So you are free to support someone that writes things against your government, and no one is going to censor your money because you own your money. And this is going to be very important. And also another big chunk of the population that gladly live on reasonable free countries will see the fact that Bitcoin is a monetary policy on itself. So Bitcoin is not going to be inflated into oblivion like all the fiat currencies. A lot of savvy people with access to information will understand that if they have their wealth in Bitcoin, they will ensure that no bank can print a gazillion tokens that will debase their currency and will well will devalue their property. Um, Also, once people understand that with Bitcoin you can basically transfer money from one point of the planet to the other without having to waste, like, I don't know, 2 to 3 weeks on a on a bank transfer with a KYC, AML, million questions. Why are you sending this money? This is you have to basically tell your life story to the bank, and the money gets stuck in bank transfers for, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 weeks, even more. You have to pay uh, uh, a big amount of fees, and once people also realize that they can send easily money around the world instantly, they will do it. So it's like it's like the internet. So nobody was on the internet because nobody could do anything on the internet. But once you realize that you can do a lot of things with Bitcoin, you'll do it because it's easy, it's convenient, it's safe, and for people living in very dangerous places under the rule of 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 tyrants, as we can say it, they will realize that once they have the freedom to own their money, they'll do it. They'll do it. Like people all often ask, well, but if governments forbid Bitcoin, yes, they are already doing it. It's forbidden to own Bitcoin in Venezuela, but you can see that the people there, they are really using Bitcoin as a means of survival, because currently their their political system is rotten to the bones, and their currency is completely trashed. The government keeps printing. So everybody gets a lot of money, but how do people do not understand that if everybody gets a lot of money, they keep printing it, it's totally worthless. So there was a picture on online who showed that you'd be better off using paper money in Venezuela than toilet paper, because the toilet paper wouldn't last so long. So this is the reality already, and unfortunately, this is already happening. Not only in Venezuela, but on other countries. I refer a lot to Venezuela because the community there is getting bigger and bigger, because fortunately they have a good access to information, and there are a lot of people adopting Bitcoin and trying to save their lives thanks to Bitcoin. Uh, it, the sad part about this is not, we don't wanna, like you said, your question makes a lot of sense, but it's not like we are destroying the fiat system. It's the fiat system that is destroying us and and our future. So Bitcoin is not. We need Bitcoin. It's not Bitcoin came to ruin the system. No, we need Bitcoin to uh, to get ourselves on a level that we can own our money, our property, and our freedom. As we start looking already, there are a lot of platforms that are censoring content, censoring free speech because of opinions, of political views, of uh, and people are being cut off of payments from PayPal, from Patreon, from other platforms just because of their political views, opinions on different matters. And I'm not saying that those platforms don't have that right. That's debatable, but you have the right to be heard and to speak freely and to receive money if people want to send you money. If I want to send money to you because you are doing a great podcast and you are talking about Bitcoin, I should be able to send you that money to support you. So, but if PayPal doesn't like your job and they cut you off, I think we should have solutions to overcome those problems. I'm not saying PayPal does not have the right as a private company. Again, that's debatable, but you should be able to have solutions to overcome those problems. And the way that we are going into the future with everybody being connected with their mobile phones to the internet, and we are going to be online every day of our lives to have this easy censorship resistant form of transferring value all around the world. It's great news. It's what we really need, in my opinion, of course.
You actually gave me some time to think about some issues. And I realized that back in 2009, when Bitcoin was launched, it was mostly an economic response to the status quo that we had at the time, with the Lehman Brothers collapsing and the whole financial recession. And to a lot of people, this didn't make much sense. They trusted their central banks. They said, this crisis is going to come to an end because we have competent economists and competent politicians who will make the right decisions to get us out of this mess. And that's why the earliest wave of Bitcoin adopters consisted of libertarians who only came up with the political biases that they already had and their previous experiences with the Austrian School of Economics. But now, as the situation gets much worse around the world, and you have a lot of companies censoring their customers just because they hold opposite political views, they are actually giving an incentive to regular people who get discriminated to look up for a currency that will never let them down, that cannot be confiscated, that cannot be blocked when a transaction takes place, that cannot be frozen in their accounts unless, of course, they hold it on centralized exchanges.
Yes.
But it gives them this autonomy and sovereignty that they did not previously have. And this issue, I guess, is much more relatable. And it's something that people can understand in an easier way because it's something which regards them personally. It's their freedom of speech. If that gets infringed or blocked in any way, of course, they're going to look for means. And this is an unfortunate turn of events if we look at our civilization at large, because we had all these movements from 1789 with the French Revolution and all the way to the free speech movements in the 60s in the American universities And at the time, the idea was that we should be talking about as many issues as we can. But in the last decade, it has become much more about not addressing
Yeah.
some issues. We don't talk about that. It's established. We have a universal worldview on that particular problem. We're not going to talk about it. And if you dare to even challenge any kind of view which has been established by us, then you're going to be marginalized. You are going to be called a certain label, and you do not deserve to have certain rights. You even have people who will go as far as reporting you to your employer to try to get you fired from your job just because you said something at one point which maybe you did not believe in, maybe you were upset, but it's that dangerous with online speech. And when we got to this point, it makes so much sense to have a currency which cannot be confiscated and is neutral from a political point of view. So this is good news for Bitcoin, but bad news for the rest of the world.
Yes, absolutely. Bitcoin didn't start in 2009. It's already, if you go and yeah, if you go and see the history of Bitcoin, it started way earlier, because for a lot of people, not so much a lot, but for a few people, this has been already a very important issue, because the money is speech. So when you use your money, you are actually engaging, on exchange of information. So it's like money is part of our information system. When we buy something, when we sell something, we are giving information. It's so this idea of Bitcoin, and this idea of people being able to transact on a free speech manner, is here, from a, I don't know exactly when it started, but Milton Friedman has great things written about this. The cypherpunk movement, that started, not sure, but late 70s, 80s, and then went on, building eCash. I think it was the name of the first digital currency that was launched. It was eCash, and then many more ideas. I'm not an expert on the cypherpunk movement yet, but
I think it was David Cham with eCash, and then you had Wei Guy with B-Money, and Nick Stavo
exactly
with BitGold. But anyway, go on with your idea.
This idea of Bitcoin is present and for a long time ago, but what we see now is with the globalization and with more access to information, is that things are the problems with the fiat currencies are now being felt all around the world. Maybe in the 70s, in the 80s, people were not so much aware of this problem because money was flowing, and if money is flowing, people are happy, wages are going up, and everybody's happy. But suddenly you realize that in the 70s you could buy a decent house, with a 2-year salary or something like that. And now you are stuck paying your house for 40 years, and people don't ask why. And the reason is simple. It's because when you keep printing money, it devalues. It's as simple as it is. It's not rocket science. And people nowadays are starting to realize this, and especially young people who start to graduate and have dreams, and when they start working, they got stuck with these minimum wages on countries that have them, or very low wages, and they look at their parents and they see a big difference. Their parents, they could afford to change their car every 3 years or something, and they could buy better houses along the way, but not anymore. So you don't get to buy a house anymore on on a big city anywhere in the world. Um, and the ones who are lucky to have that opportunity, they have to get themselves into debt. Of course, fortunately, there are still people who can afford to buy apartments and to have decent lives. But I'm speaking like for the majority of the population. People tend to attribute this kind of difficulties to specific policies, to specific movements, to but the answer is money doesn't work what it was worth in the past, just because of this process of a constant debasement of the currencies. So, but coming to Bitcoin again, uh, Bitcoin will definitely be used by by a lot of people in the near future. Um, these 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 issues about free speech are sadly on everyday on our everyday news, because this, that I think that once you start to think for yourself and to ask the right questions, you are going to leave a lot of uh, status quo mad, because you are going to challenge some established ideas uh, that are just that, ideas that don't they just don't get a check when you check them. People tend to see their uh, well. We can go on this issue, but yeah, Bitcoin is indeed free speech, and people will now start to realize this even more, because we are constantly online. We post stuff online every day. Businesses are online, and the world is moving to be online 24/7. And what best way to transfer value online 24/7 than Bitcoin? Yeah, it's Bitcoin. There's no other answer.
I was just thinking right now that you mentioned housing around the world, and I'm not sure what it's like in Portugal, where you're based right now, but here in Bucharest, in Romania, I think the average rent, so if you want to rent a small apartment, which only has one room, a bathroom, and a kitchen, it costs you more than half of the average income. So if you have an average income and you want to have a place of your own to rent it, then you're going to pay more than half of what you make just to be able to afford to have a roof above your head. And from that point on, you just carry on and try to make a decent living, buying food and, paying for public transportation and all that stuff.
And that's it. And that's it. And you're done. That's a problem. And the young people are now realizing that. So they are now realizing that they are stuck with this perspective, because nothing is going to change, and maybe it's going to get worse, because the situation is not improving. And here, where I am currently, it's pretty much the same. So I think the big cities, it's very expensive to live, according when you compare it to the medium wages. I think it's very similar, perhaps a little bit worse in the capital, in Lisbon, especially if you are looking to live in the city center. I would assume that maybe renting an apartment in the city center would be more than the medium wage. So yeah, that's the reality, and I think these two places we are speaking are not even the worst. If you try to go and live in London, then you'll see New York. You can't find a place there. So, uh, and this is all over the world. If you want to live on a big city, you'll find this all over the world. I think it's of course the market, because people prefer to live on these big cities than on other places. Of course, the market is going to always make these places more expensive. So I'm not saying that every young kid should get an apartment in the city center. Of course not. But this is an example of the debasement of the currency, and what it represents on the prospects of of your living. So um, uh, perhaps this is not the best example, but it's one example that people can relate easily. It's not the best example, probably because of the reason that the population tends to go to these places, and so the demand increases and prices tend to increase, of course. Um, but this is this is this is real, so it's a real problem. Inflation is indeed being caused by this debasement of the currency, and everybody, it's something that you can relate. Everybody can relate to this issue of wanting to own their home, to eventually have a family, or to just a place to live. Um, and it's a big issue. It's a big issue, indeed.
Sometimes when I think about the situation of some of my friends where they took a loan from the bank, they bought an apartment, they bought a car, and they are in debt for the rest of their lives. They have to pay back, so they are tied to their jobs. And I don't see how this is different from the times of feudalism, when you were forced to work your land until the end of your life to make a decent living. Of course, you can always sell your house and sell your car and move somewhere else, but it doesn't really solve the problem. You will end up in the same situation, and it's all about finding a place which you tolerate for long enough, and you can say, I can see myself living here for 30, 40 years from now. And then you just get a job and work. I guess this is what I like to call sometimes modern slavery, as you're not actually free to pursue what makes you happy. You just have to find the best paid job in order to make it, to survive, to have the standard of living that you expect from your life.
Indeed, I don't think it's that's a tough one because um, well, obviously, I think people should be able to to um, to have access to credit and to be lent money to buy a property. Um, well, the problem I see with this thing is that that is now the norm. So I don't think people uh, having to do a mortgage to go into debt to buy an apartment. That's not that's not per se bad, but the problem is that is now the norm. That is now how everybody at least in the Western world and in China and Japan. That's how everybody is doing business now. So that is now the norm. That is indeed scary because people now see that as normal. Um, in my opinion, it should be an option, not the only option. Because what's scary is that that is the only option for many people around the world. That is the scary part because people going into debt is not an issue. I think people should go into debt if they feel like doing it, and if they want to buy a better apartment, a better house. The problem is that people have to go into debt to buy just uh, their apartment and then a simple apartment to live by. So the, yes, I think it's an issue mainly because people now see that as as a normal step in their lives, which is not. It shouldn't be, in my opinion. You should be free to 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 to, to have a decent living without having to be tied to a mortgage for your life. Um, well, it's I think that's a difficult issue because uh, I think that it has more to do with with what we teach our children and the way we tend to set goals for our lives than uh, with anything else. But yes, of course, it's somehow related because the, the business of the banks is to lend money. So the more customers you have, the more money they make. So it's obviously related. If you don't have so many customers, borrowing money for 40 years, you won't make so much profit. So yeah, of course, this is somehow related. However, I think we will always have this problem. I don't think Bitcoin is going to solve that specific issue of people having to borrow money to acquire uh, a better standard of living. Um, However, if you don't have an inflationary currency, you could get yourself in a better shape because you won't be taxed on your money, taxed on your income, taxed every day on everything you do, and that situation really gives people a less chance to free themselves or to at least have a better life for themselves. Um, but I think it's it's a problem that humanity will keep having, at least for a while. In a sense, technology got us very far, so we can now build faster, with cheaper materials, with better quality. We need to find a way to people to have access to these properties on a more reasonable way. I think once they realize that their currency is as a needed taxation on them, and these promises uh, of a lot of things that governments tend to promise to people to get elected every 4 years. Once they realize that all these things are really hurting their chances of having a decent living, people will start to address these issues uh, more effectively, I think.
Well, let's forget about the depressing world of fiat currencies and talk about something
Indeed.
which sounds more positive and idealistic. So, what are your views on hyper Bitcoinization? That's a hard way to say hyper Bitcoinization.
I think like I said earlier, it's going to happen quickly. People on one day they don't know what Bitcoin is, and on the other day they are all downloading a wallet and wiring money to their friends and doing a lot of stuff with Bitcoin. And this is going to be very quickly because that's how human psychology works. Mm, We have seen this in the past with everything we are now using, especially after the internet, and after we all got online and start using a lot of the same platforms. And uh, it's amazing to see how people from all over the world are using the same platforms. Of course, this has implications about free speech that we spoke earlier, but nonetheless, it's awesome that we can communicate through the same softwares. We are using the same platforms to discuss our ideas, to check the latest videos. Um, and this will happen with Bitcoin. So there will be a moment that when suddenly people in the US, people in Japan, people in Germany, um, usually those are in the UK, Scandinavian countries, they always tend to be ahead in these type of, of solutions. And then after a while, there will be it will be normal to be using Bitcoin, at least on Western countries, and in Japan, in China, I think also, because um, uh, there will always be restrictions, I assume, especially in China, but people will always find a way to get their hands into Bitcoin and to transact and to use Bitcoin. Hyper Bitcoinization will be normal. So the funny thing, I think, is it's like Facebook. Suddenly everybody was on Facebook, and why? I don't know. Even I made a Facebook account back in the days. I don't use it anymore, but I kept using Facebook just for commercial reasons for a while. But um, it's amazing to see that it started in with those guys in those universities, and it suddenly spread all over the world because it was convenient. You could talk to people, you could keep yourself connected with a lot of people. It was very convenient. It worked well, so people just used it. They started to use email earlier as they started to use Google. So suddenly it just becomes part of the world, and I think Bitcoin will be just like that. So we now have these big discussions with who coiners. I don't know if this expression makes any sense at all, but these known these known guys that usually talk bad things about Bitcoin. I think it's mostly because they don't understand Bitcoin. Because once you understand Bitcoin, you see, okay, so this is this is going to be the future if if you if you really understand it. There's no there's no way around it. And these Paul Krugmans, these Rubinis, these guys, they don't understand because they don't need to. That's probably the first reason. They don't need to understand. Why would they understand? They've got so much money. They can do whatever they want. They can open accounts in Switzerland, in South Africa, in Saudi Arabia. Nobody's going to have restrictions on their money. They can transfer money all over the world. They can do whatever they want, and they don't feel this problem of the debasement of the currency because basically they are paid to promote this type of systems. They so even those guys in the future they will use Bitcoin because it will be all over the place. Like Paul Krugman uses his email. He for sure uses a lot his email, and he's on Twitter. He's on other platforms, and he will also be using Bitcoin. I have no doubt about it. You can say, oh, but it doesn't need to. Yes, it doesn't need to, but he's probably gonna go to some place where it's gonna be convenient to pay with Bitcoin. He's gonna visit some countries, he's gonna buy some products that it will be much more convenient to use Bitcoin than to do the usual to pay with your credit card or to change to the local currency or to I mean it's going to be obvious. It's like why wouldn't you use WhatsApp today? It's like it's so convenient. You can call everybody around the world with WhatsApp. So why wouldn't you use it? And Bitcoin is going to be like that, even for these guys. And for a lot of the population, it will be a necessity, but it will be a time where everybody will be using it. Um, so to answer your question, I think it will be just like Google. We were online, we couldn't find anything. We had to know the website uh, by head, and suddenly we had Google, and we could find anything, and everybody was using Google like Google always exists. But it was not. It is not true. Before Google, there were some platforms that tried to do the same, but they couldn't do as so well as Google ended up doing it. And everybody started to using Google like the internet was always like this. And Bitcoin in the future, kids in the future, people that are now being born, they will use Bitcoin like if Bitcoin had always existed. So f- especially for people who don't know Bitcoin already, it will be like if it was always there. Because the fact is, in 20 years, most kids won't even know a world before Bitcoin. So it would be it would it would be very easy. You probably are asking for people like us who understand Bitcoin and who seek to make this technology work better and to have this technology spread around the world. Well, for us, I think it will be a great responsibility because once you see people around you using Bitcoin, your family using Bitcoin, I think for a while you'll be worried that they lose their keys, they don't know how to use it properly, that they get scammed online, they got tricked into buying some fancy new super duper altcoin that will do Bitcoin and better. So I think for people like us, it will be a little bit boring in the beginning because we now know how to secure our keys. We know that ICOs and the blockchain mumbo jumbo is just a new fancy way to try to get your money. We'll be worried that our acquaintances, our friends, uh, could possibly get scammed. But after a while, I think with the right instruments and with the right applications, Bitcoin will be much secure, much easier to use, much friendlier to the general population. I think wallets will, in the near future, will all be using the Lightning Network to ensure that when you are wiring money, you are you are doing it instantly and with virtually no fees, and you can wire to everybody with the Bitcoin wallet. I think it's going to be an interesting process, but for the most part of the population, will be a normal thing, like using a smartphone nowadays. It's normal for everybody, and it was a big revolution if you think about it. To have everything on the palm of your hand and to be able to be connected to the internet 24/7 and to have access to these awesome applications. But we are now in 2019, and everybody has a smartphone, even in underdeveloped countries. It's normal, and I think Bitcoin is going to be the same. We'll get a point where everybody is using it, like uh, like it was already there.
Yeah, I was thinking right now while you're speaking that there is one point of disagreement between us because I don't think that Bitcoin is going to be adopted at first in the developed countries, even though it's them who have more money per capita and they can afford to buy it. I think the highest adoption rate will come from those who actually need it to flee their countries, to get away from their dictatorships, and to acquire that kind of freedom which they are lacking. Also, it will be about, I know it's generic in the case of Bitcoin because banking the unbanked has been quite a catchphrase in the last decade. But also, these people who have no access to any kind of financial services, they might get into a larger scale than people who just grew up in the kind of peaceful and somewhat friendly environment like us Europeans. We don't really have an incentive to distrust our central banks and our governments unless a crisis happens. And if a crisis happens every decade, maybe, or decade and a half, and we see it going for a year or two, and then it gets back to what we call a normal state, even though we have larger debt and we have no idea how that is going to get paid. I don't think that us Europeans are going to spearhead this movement, neither us nor the Americans. I think these people in Syria and in Venezuela and in Palestine and in Taiwan and other places around the world which have internet access, but at the same time, they have very limited freedom. I think they are the ones for whom Bitcoin makes much more sense as a choice for a currency. And they are the ones who will emancipate themselves and grow out of their current financial status. And I really hope that it's also the way you pointed, that we are going to see all these developed countries adopt it because it makes rational sense and it appeals to those who believe in a fixed supply of a currency. So a well-known inflation rate, which at one point turns into a deflation as soon as all the coins are available on the market. But unfortunately, I can't even speak to educated people that I know about Bitcoin and how it can make the world a better place because they don't believe in it and they have been educated in this environment of Keynesian economics where it's all about printing money basically and then trying to leverage and figure out what to do next. And I guess their side of the story is much more complicated as it takes a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience to not make a currency devalue very fast in time. But Bitcoin, as our civilization moves on, will make even more sense. And it's sad that we got to this point where governments have lost their legitimacy in relation to those who really believe in the value of their holdings and of their property. But we should be glad that we had somebody like Satoshi Nakamoto to invent a currency and then leave so that we are all more or less in charge of the economic policy by running our own nodes and only choosing whom we trust and basically participating with a voting right in the whole consensus mechanism.
Indeed, indeed. I don't disagree with you. I hope you are right because I really hope. I'm not saying this with another meaning. I really hope you are right that people on those countries that have tougher situation that live under more corrupt governments and more financial instability and have least access to a decent banking system. I really hope that these people can access to Bitcoin and well have this opportunity to set themselves free from those central banks and those governments. I really hope that you are right. I said what I said because this is a new technology, and I was pointing the adoption of Bitcoin. I was making an analogy with other adoptions of technologies that we know that we are currently using. I think that that if those people have an opportunity, they will take it. And I hope you're right. And I hope Bitcoin gets adopted on those countries. But I also think that in the more Western countries and Japan and China and so on, those more developed countries, I think people will always want to be ahead, or to have the latest new technology, and to, especially when they realize that they can benefit financially from it, because you were talking about financial crisis. I mean, the question is when, because uh, it will happen, of course. There's no doubt about it. I think we can look at the German index. It's on a roller coaster, but on the way down, Deutsche Bank is one of the biggest in the world. It's going very quickly down. Um, Pointing these two examples because we are talking about one of the strongest economies in the world, and probably one of the freest countries in the world also, and people we most people are educated, are literated, and have access to information, and they will most likely adopt Bitcoin, uh, because it, they can do it much easier than someone in Venezuela, and they can afford to buy one Bitcoin. But in Venezuela, if you can afford zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, it's already a lot in Venezuela. So that's why, in my opinion, these developed countries will always tend to lead on the adoption, and probably because companies that um, companies are more likely to have the technology and to have the people ahead that are capable of quickly switching to a Bitcoin payment system. Although it's not difficult, but I wouldn't see someone on a developed country doing it as quickly as someone on the United States, or in the UK, or in Germany, or in Japan. Um, I think um, um, shop owners, people with their own businesses, can quickly change to this new technology much more easily. But yes, I hope you are right regarding the financial crisis. Unfortunately, I think we are already going into another one. Of course, these things tend to lag a lot in time, because first it's the bond market, then it's the government deals, and then it's the stock market, and then and then we inflate a little bit more, we go a little bit more into debt, and suddenly there's no money to pay for anything, and that's it, another one. And I don't know how we're gonna get out of this next one, but I have an idea. I think central banks are going to print much more money this time, because the last time apparently was not enough. So that, I think we have seen this before, but just it gets bigger and bigger every time, because you are asking, are how are we going to pay the debt? We are not. Because if we paid the, the debts, the whole financial system would collapse. Because once you understand it's created with debt. So you cannot pay the debt. You cannot pay all the debt, because if you pay all the debt, your currency goes to zero. It just can't work. So we know for sure one thing: we'll have more debt and we'll have more taxes, and people will be more unhappy and uh, uh, unfortunately, we all we always end up in this part of the of the discussion. But yeah, I think that's why I said I think this will be the first countries to adopt. But I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, just as we speak right now, and it's very interesting that it's topical and it's coincidental. One of the worldwide trends on Twitter right now is Maduro no es mi presidente, which means Maduro is not my president. And you have lots of posts on Twitter of people telling their firsthand experiences with the regime from Venezuela and how they despise their own president and how they want him to go. And in terms of quantity, I think we have, let's see, latest. How many tweets are there? 82.6 at this time. No, also 27. So you have two different hashtags on the same topic. Over 100,000 tweets posted in the last hour, I think. And it's a big movement, I guess. And I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but Venezuela is a very rich country. It has natural resources in oil, and they used to do very well during the previous regime, which was also socialist under Hugo Chavez. But the difference between Chavez, who passed, and Maduro, who came to replace him, is basically the relationship with the United States. And this is one of the problems and one of the cases of, maybe it's not a popular term, but neocolonialism. When you have a big world power which imposes on how your resources get traded, and if you get into bad terms with that world power, you basically cannot engage in world trade anymore, and all of your resources are worthless because nobody will buy from you. And getting back to Bitcoin, I've actually heard an interesting proposal by Alena Vranova, who works at Casa and used to work at Trezor. And she told me during one of the interviews that we did that she has this idea that oil or petrol should be traded in Bitcoin instead of US dollars, so that the countries which hold large amounts of this natural resource can actually bypass the regulations of the United States, set the price according to however they find the price to be acceptable for their businesses, and engage in trade without worrying that they can have a nasty embargo. And that to me is an interesting concept. I'm not sure how feasible it is in practice, because in order to sell oil, you actually need the proper technology to extract it from the ground. And you also need proper transportation, and you need to take it on international waters, and you need to pass some borders. And I guess if the United States want to stop you in the process, they can just do this kind of embargo where your oil becomes illegal in every state that is allied with the United States of America. That can be the case. But it still brings a greater balance. And I personally believe that this structure of international relations, where you have at least two big powers which are ideologically opposed, works best for maintaining peace and making sure that you have constant and important negotiations regarding the state of affairs. Otherwise, it's just one big monopoly, which is dangerous for everybody. And as a Romanian, I've had, not me personally, but my parents and my grandparents who lived under communism, they had very bad experiences with the Russians, who just, after World War II, when the Russians came as victors of the World War, they were ruthless and they were shameless, and they would just come into your house and steal whatever they found of value. They would rape your wife. They would impose their own politicians into power, and after that they brought their communist regime, which meant that they took all of your possessions and they became property of the state. And then we had this nasty totalitarian regime for 50 years. And then when we got back, it's been almost 30 years since we got rid of communism, and it's not like we are on the right path for a proper transition to universal human rights, to a free market, to all that kind of stuff. It's still a very corrupt environment with lots of leverages. So I think I've said a lot of stuff, and I've raised a lot of issues.
I think once you start to address these issues, you get to a common denominator. You speak about Venezuela, you speak about the United States, you speak about Romania, you speak about Russia, the Soviet Union. The common denominator is this: people delegate too much of their lives into other people's into other people's powers. So Bitcoin is going to change this, I think, also, because it's inevitable. Otherwise, you'll see this happening again and again and again. Because the problem is that you got to a point where you depend so much on these governments that you are stuck. You can't do anything, and you can say, "Oh, but those were Soviet governments with communist ideas." Oh, but Venezuelans, they are under a different government now than before, and now there's Trump in power in the United States, and for me, the common denominator is this: is people delegate too much of their lives into other people's power. So we will have to realize this, and I think future generations will address this much better than past ones, because what past generations did was they just fully delegate everything. So they gave up everything to the power of a few entities, for many reasons. For many reasons, the communist idea, it's a very I don't know how to say this without sounding stupid, but it could be appealing to some people. The communist idea could be appealing to some people, but once you realize what's really underneath that idea, it's the total denial of you, of you as a person, of you as an individual, of you as a human being, and this happens also in other places in the world, in the USA. People gave up on their freedoms because of the menace of war, because of the menace of being attacked. I'm not saying that this is not an important issue. Of course, I think this is one of the main aspects that I think government will be around for a long time. Is mainly because of this problem of wars and the expectation of being under attack. But once you remove the power of a government to print money and to fund wars, taxing their own population, you will reduce a lot this risk, because currently governments have this ability to engage in wars because they can just print a lot of money and tax it on people and go and strike other countries. After hyper Bitcoinization, if governments, well, they will keep printing money, of course, but their money will be worth much less, so they won't be able to engage so easily in wars. This is going to change a lot, I think, also. And once people realize that they can control their lives, they can own their lives, they will delegate a lot less to their governments, I think. Going back to what you said, yeah, it's very sad to see a country like Venezuela, a very rich country with a lot of natural resources and a great population, being, I don't know how to say this, but this is almost like a financial massacre on the population, on their own population. What these governments are doing, just based on this nonsense ideology that there is a central government that should dictate every aspect of your life. And what people probably are starting to realize now is that you cannot delegate your life to other guys. They are just they are going to be corrupted. It's obvious. It's not that, oh, we need to find a better person. We need to find a new better Maduro. We need to find a new Chavez. We need to find a new Putin. It's not going to work. It's not going to work because you will be corrupted. That's not even a question. The question is will you engage in physical attacks in the population? Will you lock everybody in prison that opposes you? You can pose those questions, but the people will have to realize that they cannot delegate their lives into other people's powers. It's nonsense. I think that this 20th century, with all these big wars, got us into this position where governments are indeed very powerful and control every aspect of our lives. But we need to start shifting the situation, and we need to restore a little bit of balance. We need to start looking on ways to avoid that this control becomes tyrannical, because it's the only possible outcome of this kind of government controls. At some point, it's much easier for a lot of people to have the general population under control. There are a lot of things that rely on expectations, and if you can predict the outcome of a certain situation, it's much better than if you have to rely on uncertainty and the freedom of individuals to probably change things. Okay, so and Bitcoin being used as the currency for for dollar for dollar no for oil for um I don't know because if you start doing this, you are going to be attacked for sure. So probably countries will use their fiat currencies. They will have to find a way to 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 stop using the US dollar. They are already looking at it. China is working on it. Russia also is looking at it. A lot of European countries, they don't oppose to the idea of ditching the dollar, uh, but they don't want to do it for obvious reasons. At least they don't want to be the first to do it. But if you are a small country that sells oil and you start doing it yourself, you won't. You probably shouldn't do it. But yes, the oil will be will be sold in the future and bought in the future with a different currency. I don't know if it's going to be Bitcoin. Uh, the first replacement. I think the first replacement could be other fiat currencies, but as we go further, I don't know. This is a bit of speculation, but as we go further into Bitcoin adoption around the world, it could be a reasonable solution, but I don't see that happening now. I think China and Russia will try to trade oil on a different currency and most likely one of their own. Most likely the Chinese currency. At least for what I've been looking in the past years, the Chinese are really interested in backing their money with gold. I don't know if they are going to really do this, but that would be an alternative to the US dollar, is to change at least on some parts of the world, uh, because I think after a while, if you ditch the dollar, I think if the euro will still be around, I think perhaps the European countries will want to trade it with euro. So I'm not sure if Bitcoin is going to be the one at first, but will eventually be the one in the future. Probably like everything else for convenience, because mm, it, in the future, people will eventually understand that it could be very convenient. But yeah, I don't know, because oil will always have a lot of power so attached. So could be tricky to do this. um, and well, I think um, Bitcoin will also help us to start thinking about these issues, especially the issue about the power that governments have over the general population because of their ability to control your access to money.
So, what do you think, as Buzz Lightyear, who has been around the galaxy and has seen many planets evolve and has decided in a weird way to settle on this boring Earth place? What do you think about the announcement which came out more as a rumor in the form of something which is not confirmed, but it might be in the talks, that Russia might be adopting Bitcoin to get away from all the economic sanctions that it has been subjected to?
Um, Well, throughout the galaxy, you find the same the same the same things, and uh, this is I don't think this is different from other planets that I've have visited in the past. And this one is not that boring either. So there are a lot of boring people, but sometimes we need those boring times to really enjoy the other ones. So this is not boring at all. This planet is filled with great people and with great minds, and so far I'm more than glad to be here. um, Regarding Russia and Bitcoin, when I see this news, I know for a fact that there is a big chance that they are not uh, they are not factual. It's not that the news could not have a little bit of fundamentals about it, but what's Russia? The question is it the Russian government, or I don't know, a few oligarchs perhaps could be interested in Bitcoin? That would make a lot of sense. Why would they store their money on a on a, on a currency that really has no significant value? If they could store it in Bitcoin, well, that would make a lot of sense for a lot of rich people in Russia. It could be interesting for the government itself. Could be it could be interesting, but how would that reflect in the life of the regular folk in Russia? I don't think it would change anything. I don't think I don't think people in Russia would start to receive their income in Bitcoin paid by the government. I don't think the news is about that. I think that the news is perhaps someone of power sees Bitcoin as an interesting solution, but I don't think Russia as a whole is going to adopt Bitcoin. It doesn't make any sense. For so many reasons, it doesn't make any sense for a country like Russia to adopt Bitcoin as their own currency. It's it's counter logical in my opinion. However, there are certainly a lot of powerful people in Russia that know very well what Bitcoin is, and they know very well what this technology is going to do in the future. And most likely, there are a lot of people that are connected to the power in Russia that already own Bitcoin. That could be the case.
Well, I don't think it was ever the case to completely accept Bitcoin as the currency for Russia. It was just about international trades being done in Bitcoin. So they avoid the exposure to the US dollar and the euro, on which they have sanctions. So they engage in trade. They deliver their gas or their oil or their gold or whatever resource they're selling. They get paid in Bitcoin, and they quickly exchange it to pay for their operations in rubles or whatever currency they choose.
Yeah, I
I know they
understand.
have some exchanges, and some of them are scammy for us, like Yobit, which turns out to be based in Russia. And they might also be in good relations with some Chinese exchanges or Korean. So it's
I think
possible.
yeah, of course it is possible, and it, it it's indeed very possible. As you, my question is, if they don't if they don't exchange it back to their currency, it makes a lot of sense. If they want to change back to their currency, it doesn't make so much sense because their own currency would be developed a lot in regards to Bitcoin. So they would be buying assets in Bitcoin and they would exchange for a very, very I don't know, developed currency. But I don't know, it could make sense. But I would think that they wouldn't sell Bitcoin, or at least they wouldn't sell the majority part of the Bitcoin, and they would keep transacting in Bitcoin. That could make sense. Yes, indeed.
So let's make some kind of futuristic speculation about Bitcoin 10 years from now. And I know that you are Buzz Lightyear and you have so much experience with advanced technologies and how they travel across galaxies. So, what is the prediction of Buzz Lightyear, not in terms of price, but in terms of reach, awareness, and adoption for Bitcoin?
Um, yeah, like I said, I think it's gonna be at some point gradual, but after a while, it's gonna be all over the world. I have no doubt about it. Like I said, people were not using smartphones a few years ago, and now you find a smartphone on every place on earth. People were not connected a few years ago online every day, and now we are indeed online every day. We do most of our activities online every day. I think Bitcoin is going to be the transfer of value, the transfer of value of the future, for sure. I think we'll be all over the world. I think it will coexist with fiat currencies, with digital, almost 100% digital fiat currencies in the future also. But Bitcoin will be the standard, like has been written for a while now. Bitcoin will be the standard, of course. In terms of technology, technology will be. We are now using smartphones that pretty much are part of our human bodies. I think the future of technology will be um, we we still be connected with access to all these applications, all this information, and but on a more seamless way. The smartphone is still detached away from our bodies, still needs to be charged every day. There's still a lot of well problems. uh, I think the future will be we will put this thing, this smartphone, we'll put it inside of us, or not inside, but at least we will be even more connected, um, and with everything that comes with it. So, I think people need to be ready for this these changes because they are going to happen. We will be able to send information much faster around the world. Our fingers won't be pushing buttons with letters on laptops. That is for sure. I don't know when that change is going to happen, but it will happen. We won't be typing on our keyboards. Probably a mouse will be something that we will laugh at in the future. because a mouse is going to be like looking at the cassettes or something like in the future. But it's going to be funny. We will see a lot of things happening, and the ability to be online and to be able to access all this information and to be able to still be a free human being will be very much connected with the growth of Bitcoin. That is for sure.
Okay, Buzz Lightyear, how can us Earthlings and citizens of this planet follow you and see your latest ideas and thoughts in regards to these issues?
You can find me on Twitter, and I basically like to learn about Bitcoin and to keep track of the new developments that are occurring with Bitcoin. Unfortunately, Bitcoin has attracted a lot a lot of noise. Unfortunately, and not because I think there are things that have to have to happen so that we can go and pass through them. So we still have a lot of confusion, purposely, I think, my opinion, brought into this space to avoid that people really understand Bitcoin because they want to sell other things. Because if you adopt Bitcoin and start using Bitcoin, you are not going to make someone richer by buying his new blockchain token 3.0, decentralized everything. So I think it's a process. We need to go through this. We need to really understand that Bitcoin is about your financial sovereignty, about your ability to be a free, sovereign individual, and to have full access to your own property. Once we get past through this, we'll see a lot of new cool stuff happening on top of Bitcoin. That's it. The people that are trying to sell other forms of money. I can't engage much more because it's today, unfortunately, it's an odd topic on this space. People are trying to sell you everything, and they will tell you that you are wrong because there will be many tokens. I wonder, well, yeah, of course there will be many tokens, but why would I care? Why would I want to have a lot of tokens? Why would I want to buy your sandbags and give you my money? It doesn't make any sense. It's just ludicrous. I don't I don't have a need to have my ID on the blockchain. I don't have a need to have my food chain, whatever things I buy in supermarkets. I don't need them stored on a blockchain. And once people realize how stupid this is, they will focus on on the real deal. Is Bitcoin needs a blockchain to do what it does. If you don't need a censorship form of speech, if you don't need an immutable form of speech, if you don't need that, you don't. A blockchain is the worst thing you can do to a database. It's just it's just illogical, and the incentives are never there. People that talk about voting on the blockchain, well, that's just plain stupid. Why would you do that? What would be the incentive to keep that ledger true? There is no incentive at all. If the major incentive is to overthrow a government and to place some some the dictator on elected by a blockchain voting, you will do it. There is no incentive that will stop you to do it. So once people realize that this blockchain nonsense is just that, it's just a nonsense. That if we will pass through that and we'll start to realize that Bitcoin is indeed it's indeed what we need to free ourselves and to start our own path as self sovereign individuals.
Well, it was certainly a pleasure to have this nearly 2 hour discussion on the Bitcoin takeover. And just in case I didn't say it too many times already, this has been Buzz Lightyear. And it's incredible to me to speak to Buzz Lightyear, as I was a big fan of Toy Story when I was a child. And now I get to hear all these pieces of Bitcoin wisdom from his mouth. And I hope this has been an interesting episode and you found many good points. And also, if there's going to be a season 2 of the Bitcoin Takeover podcast, then it would be a pleasure to have Buzz Lightyear once again. So thank you.